Researching the women in the family tree is like hitting a brick wall. Name changes after marriage, less documented roles in community. It's tough. But today, we're breaking down exactly how you can find your female ancestors even when the records are sparse. Hey there, I'm Lisa Lisson, a genealogy expert with over 15 years of experience helping others find their ancestors. On this YouTube channel, I share my best strategies, tips, and tools for uncovering your family history and building a healthy family tree without being overwhelmed. Now let's start out talking about these women in our family tree by really just busting a myth. And that is, they were not just a housewife. They were not just the wife of so-and-so. They had very full and very active lives. And we need to remember that as genealogy researchers. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to give them their full identity within our family tree. Too often, we think of those women just in terms of their married lives. Yes, those marriage records were important. In fact, they're crucial to our genealogy research, right? But they are just one chapter in a woman's life. So let's think about it. Your great-great-grandmother wasn't just a wife. She had a life before she got married. She had her own interest. She probably was involved in the community in some way around her. She may have even had a career at some point in her life. So that means one of the best ways to find the women in your family tree is to understand their community. Knowing what was happening in her world, in her community, can reveal perhaps hidden resources or hidden records that we hadn't thought to look in before. Now, understanding the community around your ancestor to help further tell their story and even just identify them in your family tree is not a new concept. I've talked about this in previous videos, and I will have links to those videos down in the description below. I think we tend to overlook it when it comes to researching the women in our family tree. So let's consider what this looks like and how it could play out in the research of women in your family tree. Maybe the community where your ancestor lived and participated had a very strong church community. Maybe she was part of that church community or a church community. Or maybe gardening clubs were the local trend at the time that she lived there. To add richness to her story, try looking at the local sources, like church directories, historical societies, and even the local archives. They are often filled with the stories of these types of activities, as well as a list of the members. Before I go any further, I am curious to hear from you. Has learning about local history helped you understand your ancestors' life better? Share that experience in the comments below. I'd like to hear how that is working out for you, but I would also like to hear what types of resources you use when it comes to learning about your ancestors within a community. After high school, I attended Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a women's college. Now, this was the 80s, and this is a time when we as women were being encouraged to go after those non-traditional roles if that's what we wish to do. That we could think outside of the box, that we could achieve anything, and if there was something we wanted to pursue, we could and we should pursue that particular career. Now, our great-great-grandmothers didn't have the same options that we did. Some of the career paths and opportunities were not open to them. And so we as genealogists, we as family historians, as we are researching, we need to understand that. We need to know what opportunities were available to her within her family, within her home, within her community, for that time period that we as researchers are actually studying. It might be, and probably was, very different than what I experienced in the 1980s coming forward. Now let's dive into roles that, say, our great-grandmother, our great-great-grandmothers and back may have played in their community. What was available? Well, we need to first determine what types of clubs, what types of community organizations were available. And was there the American Red Cross? Maybe there were sewing circles or quilting circles. Maybe your ancestor was part of the historical society or even a garden club. They might have kept member lists, they might have created their own directories, and certainly their activities were going to be found in the newspapers. And let's take this a tiny bit further and think about the roles that she might have had at home, which likely involved cooking and meal preparation. So whether your ancestor was known for her amazing biscuits or, well, her not so great beef stew, cooking played a large part in her life. Certainly in the home, but then outside of the home. Church and community cookbooks where women would donate or contribute their recipes, their best recipes, are a fantastic resource for us as researchers to perhaps find our ancestor, put her in time and place. Look out for these. Actively seek out those local cookbooks in the community where your ancestor lived. Because beyond putting her in time and place, They can offer a glimpse into her cultural heritage through favorite foods that she might have contributed, the organization that she might have contributed her recipe to. Even some of these included family stories or community stories about the organization or the local community. These can be rich, absolutely rich, with information about the women in the community and in our family tree. Now, here's something that we as researchers can easily and probably often do overlook. The women in our family tree may have taken on a new role or career later in life. Once the children were older, or perhaps she became a young widow, she may have needed to seek out a job or a career in order to be able to support her family, or perhaps she just needed to get out of the house when there was not as much going on. Now, my great-grandmother, once the kids were a little bit older, she actually ran a grocery store in their little community. And my friend Melissa Barker, you might know her as the archive lady, her grandmother started her own beauty salon later in life. And well, of course, we have the classic example of Grandma Moses, who began painting at the age of 78. Your female ancestor may have had a second act, shall we call it, as well. So don't stop searching for her in the records if you don't find them early on. Expand your timeline forward in her life. She may have left evidence and clues for you, but it's at a much later time point in her life. Now, another area we don't want to overlook in our research would be occupational and perhaps educational records. Now, some women early on may have worked outside of the home, depending on the time period. They may have been nurses. They may have been teachers. They may have been shop owners. And even if she was a school volunteer, there could be rosters. We could find evidence of her in a yearbook or even school newsletters who were listing her involvement. And for women working outside the home such as this, things such as local business ads, school rosters, city directories, can all be resources to help determine what that career might have been for your ancestor. They are a great way to see if perhaps how she might have been engaging in her community outside of her home. So now I hope that you kind of have this idea and that I've got you thinking that women were not just keeping house, keeping the children. They had multiple chapters in their lives. And so now that we're kind of thinking in those lines, where do we actually go to find the records? Well, first off, you want to think local. Start local. Always, always, always reach out to the local library where your ancestors lived. So in that county or in that region where your ancestors lived. Most local libraries have a community section, which might be books, they could be published family histories that are perhaps only on their bookshelves. They have vertical files. Guys, if you have not checked out the vertical files for this type of information, you are missing out on potentially breaking down your brick wall. Okay. A vertical file, if you are not familiar with this concept at a library, is essentially a vertical file cabinet. That's where it gets its name. And they are files that contain various records, various ephemera, all kinds of things that are important to the community. They have some bearing on the local residents, on the history and documenting the history of local residents, but they are perhaps not something that the state archives would receive or would want to have and maintain in their collections. So they might end up in that vertical file. The types of things that you might find here would be, say, church histories and directories. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous finds for the genealogy research. I have found genealogist notes. So previous genealogists who perhaps, the family when they passed away, donated their genealogy research to the local library. This can be gold and contain a number of different types of clues, as you can well imagine, that you could use in your research. I have found business ads. I have found school programs for the Christmas pageant. I have found school newsletters that write up about the PTA members. So again, all of these have potential to have the women and give us a glimpse into the women's lives of the community and hopefully our personal ancestor there. So definitely want to check out the local library, the local regional book section that they might have, as well as that vertical file. And of course, always talk to the reference librarian there because they are local and they can help you. They might know someone else you need to talk to. They can share resources with you that you might not have thought to look for that are unique to that particular community. Also reach out to the local historical society. Again, sometimes they have their own repositories, their own records collections, so I would encourage you to reach out to them. Many times when I've done this, they might have some interesting write-ups. I have found some unique family histories that have never really been published, but that the historical society members may have written up to share among themselves. This type of thing typically is not digitized, so it does require some work on your end, but take the time to send an email, take the time to make that phone call, and you may be able to find that one vital clue that you need. And of course, newspapers, guys. You've got to read the local newspaper. Now, there are lots of newspaper databases online. All of the major genealogy databases have them. So, Family Search, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, Find My Past. They all have newspapers online, but you also have things such as newspapers.com, you have Genealogy Bank, you have Chronicling America. So there are a number of places to check. But what I can tell you is if you check these and you're not finding the results that you want, the search results that are helping you, I would reach out to the library. Once again, guys, I love my local library. Go back to that librarian and ask her what they might have. They may have local newspapers that had very short runs that have not been digitized in any of the databases, but they may still have them on. They could potentially have the original, or they may actually have them on microfilm or microfiche. So talk to the librarian. That has actually been one of the #1 ways that I have been able to find the information on my ancestors who lived in really small rural areas that didn't have an ongoing newspaper. Now, here's one more tip that I'll give you when it comes to understanding the community that my female ancestors lived in, and that is I will typically take a couple issues of a local newspaper, if I can find that, for the time period that they lived there, and I just read it. I just read the page. I just read the newspaper page by page. I'm not necessarily doing a search. I'm not looking for but by reading that newspaper page by page, I understand what is important to the community, what is important to the world, what's happening in the world. And just like we would read the newspaper today or listen to a news show today to understand our world around us, I'm reading the newspaper of her day so that I can understand the world around her at that time. And absolutely don't forget to read the gossip columns, because those can be fun. All right, so I have an assignment for you at this point. I want you to pick one area of your ancestor's life, your female's ancestor's life, one part of her time frame, whether it is when she pre-marriage, whether it is during her early married life with young children, whether it's her second act in life later on after her children are grown, and dive deep researching into that. Focus your search on that area and using those local resources and see what you can dig up. Your research will be better for it. And even if you do not find her, you will be a better researcher. Now watch the video on your screen now for the next steps in finding your female ancestor. It's called They Weren't Lost, Just Hiding. Finding Female Ancestors in Death Records.